Let's face it, building culture is hard, and in this new normal, it's really, really hard. So how do you do it? And equally as important, how do you measure it? Hello, and welcome to the BetaKit podcast. I'm your host, Rob Kennedy, and my co-host, as always, is Douglas Soltis, editor-in-chief of BetaKit. As we settle into the ebb and flow of what a modern workplace looks like, we wanted to look deep into the heart of the Canadian startup ecosystem and get some real-time data. How are companies faring building a hybrid or remote culture? How do you know if it's going well before it's too late? Yeah, you can have remote parties now, but can you actually build cohesion to effectively steer a company? We invited Shawn Hewat, CEO and co-founder of Wavy, to come onto the show and provide us with those insights. Her platform tries to solve this problem, and her team has been at the heart of the matter throughout the pandemic.
So, Shawn, I guess the place that we should start first is maybe a little bit of context on the current state of Canadian Tech's employee base. Can we get a vibe check? What's going on? Are we peak burnout? Are we peak career transition? Are we peak remote? Are we peak hybrid? What's the sense of the workforce in Canadian tech from your perspective right now?
I feel like we've reached peak burnout. I met with a bunch of people and culture leaders last summer, and COVID was spiking up again, or we all thought it was going to for the fall. And I think the general vibe check then was everyone is completely over it. Everyone is exhausted, and this past couple of years have really taken a toll. I don't know. Maybe it's spring. Maybe it's things opening back up again. But I think we've reached peak burnout, hopefully. And maybe the little bit of change or return of normalcy just in life in general and in workplaces, it's given us a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, well, I think our province is failing to continue to respond or even acknowledge the existence of COVID is definitely really helping in that regard. I know that I'm definitely over it. When talking to the companies that you work with and support, and this is probably like an easy way for you to segue into telling our audience what Wavy does, what are they focused on? Because it's very cool for me to say on a podcast that I'm over it, but I also worry every day about the state of my remote workers, whether they have or are about to get COVID. I want to pull down the cool podcast host veil for a second, as if that existed. But like, I guess when you're talking to companies now, not, I guess, these people and culture leaders within their own environment, what are they most afraid of right now, or what are they most obsessing over in terms of trying to find solutions?
Yeah. And I'm not saying that the state of the world is perfect right now and that everything's peachy when it comes to the world of work in Canada. But, I think there's a general optimism starting to rise from the ashes, if that makes any sense. To give the context, Wavy helps companies build culture no matter where their employees are located. And we've got a SaaS platform that helps you plan, manage, and measure your culture initiatives, and a marketplace of experiences to choose from. So we support online, in-person, and asynchronous experiences. The biggest theme that I'm seeing right now is people are just freaking out about how to create a sense of community and belonging that's inclusive and that's accessible when there's people working all over the place. In offices, in co-working spaces, in their homes, in cafes, in Mexico, you name it. How do you
sometimes
kind of create all at once? Wavy itself is, we're a team of 20 and we have every single scenario there, even just in our small team. So this is a consistent theme that I'm seeing. A lot of companies and people leaders are figuring out kind of what's next and what that workplace is going to look like. And for the most part, it is flexible and remote friendly and hybrid. And there's just kind of that puzzle to figure out how you can create that sense of community and belonging with such a complex work environment. That's what I hear about every day.
Okay, before we get into like the complexity of that and maybe how experiences fit in and maybe even like what experiences mean in the year of our Lord 2022 versus the pre-pandemic that we were talking about right before the show and the beers we had in person back when we thought this was going to be a month-long thing. But I want to just focus in for a moment on the optimism Is that coming from 2 years of historicals on like, well, if we've gotten through 2 years of this, it's not going to necessarily be worse. We just have to figure out how to manage it. Is it removing ourselves from a state of emergency mindset to a new reality mindset, or like just what are you seeing there?
I mean, I think I am a glasses half full kind of person. My team would definitely look to me as an eternal optimist. But I think it's coming from a space of over the past 2 years, a lot of people have had time and have had a lot of time alone with their thoughts to reevaluate, what am I doing and is it aligned with my vision and values and what I'm hoping to get out of my career? And there's been a whole lot of change, like not to focus in too much on the great resignation, but like within tech especially, a lot of people have made shifts to new companies, new careers, and the new workforce coming in, Gen Z. Their most important thing is that what they're doing is related to their personal mission, vision, and values. So I think it may be coming from that refreshed opportunities, lots of shifting around and refocusing on personal and career goals. And then a lot of change from employers too, who have had to take a hard look at how you create culture when people want flexibility above all else and are making lots of strides to create something that's a lot more accessible, inclusive, and not just saying, we're having beer on Friday and that's our company's culture. I think people are listening a lot more to what employees are looking for, and that's refreshing.
As a professional half empty kind of person, it still doesn't it feel like, I know we're making this up as we go as a society. This is not something we've ever really done before. Yeah, we're figuring it out. It's been 2 years. It feels like it's just different. And I have yet to see a strategy that's actually, oh, let's do a hybrid. Maybe we'll come back. Like maybe people are pining for some future that might never come. And it feels like people are sort of, I don't know, I don't like being alone with my thoughts for a second because I go into bad places. And so...
Which is why we podcast them, to protect ourselves from the voices
for ourselves.
Yeah.
Exactly. I want a recording to prove that this was me. So I guess what I'm wondering is, has that not just fed into the anxiety and the opportunism of, well, I'm never going to be satisfied at anything. So you work at a job for 6 months and you're like, yeah, to hell with it. This isn't perfect and you're never going to get there. So every 6 months you're switching gigs for more money and potentially that thing that you will never find. And then from the employer's perspective, it's like, oh, let's create culture. Well, that's really easy to say. And you definitely can't, to your point, Shawn, like be lazy about it and be like, beer equals culture. You have to be intentional about it. But I haven't seen either from the employee side or the employer side a cohesive or some semblance of a solution here. It just feels like we're groping in the dark, and we're still groping in the dark 2 years in.
We've got, the optimistic side, which is it still might be a pandemic, but at least I'm working at the new job that I chose for a bigger salary, and I'm happen to be doing it from Mexico. And then you have the other side, which is the company being like, we really need to keep these people so they don't take a job to go work in Mexico. Or, hey, we just hired a bunch of new people and they work in Mexico and we can't bring them beers on Friday. So let's meet in the middle of that and then talk about the messiness of these experiences, because that is a word that is ripe for unpacking, and I think probably means something very different in 2022 versus 2019. But I'm thinking a very different thing dependent upon each company, or maybe even within teams at companies. What are you seeing there, Shawn?
I mean, I think the words work and culture as a whole are very different things now, or looked at very differently than they were in 2019. Maybe to go a bit macro with this, in learning a lot about the space and in talking to many business leaders and experts in HR and people and culture, my big takeaway is that this space was ripe for change well before the pandemic. What happened with COVID simply accelerated trends, maybe by 5 or 10 years, but it's not like things are going to go backwards now that the pandemic is, not coming to an end, but there is some return to normalcy. So that's an interesting trend. And then the other is employee expectations. Like, people used to choose where they work and that's where they would live. And generally people today, especially in the world of tech, want to choose where they live and work wherever they want and really crave that flexibility above all else. So when we think of how work happens and why, that's changed. So obviously culture has to change a lot with it. And ultimately it starts with vision, mission, and values. Like, what does your company fundamentally believe? Can you build that out in collaboration with your employees, not for them? And then 80% of culture is how you work. Where does work happen? Is it remote? Is it hybrid? Is it flexible? What's the equipment and software you're using? How do you communicate with each other and collaborate with each other? How do you recruit, retain, and advance employees? Like, that's the majority of culture. And then kind of the space that I think about, and that's Wavy's bread and butter, is the things you can do to activate and reinforce culture. And these are the practices like team building, wellness, DE&I, social good, learning, perks and gifting. All of these things are different practices that companies can use to really bring culture to life and reinforce things like values and vision. Ultimately, like, one of the best ways to do that, to bring people together and create that one sense of community and belonging, is through shared experiences. But we've just seen such a shift in values and what people are looking for. It sounds like the three of us are the extroverted type that very much would like a beer after work together. But I think a lot of this shift has leveled the playing field for people who don't want to do that, who don't consume alcohol, who have little kids they need to go pick up from school, who are more introverted, and their idea of great culture is a company that encourages them to go home early or work from home and enjoy that quiet, focused time, or to do something a little more wellness or learning focused. I think everyone's learning and engagement styles are so different, and the old ways of doing things were kind of catered to that one type, which is extroverted, social, can be free after work and have drinks with colleagues. And that wasn't inclusive as it was. So
yeah, it was
a refreshing change.
I don't think it was intentionally operationalized in the way that it needs to be if no one can just flow out the elevator to the bar or to the kitchen at a certain point. But I want to dig into, I guess, if experiences are the ways or the places and the events where these things happen now, and then just have you hype check BetaKit's own reporting to see if we're being fair here, because we recently covered some fundraising that you had raised. So I think a 2.5 million seed round from Garage Capital, Two Small Fish, Backbone Angels, Archangel, tons of angels. The title of the story was about Wavy raising money to combat remote work, burnout, and talent churn. But then in a subhead, we got a little cute with it, and we were like, beer tastings, yoga, wellness workshops. There's a Wavy experience for that. And I wonder if you feel like that's a fair identification, and that these types of experiences are the place where, if not some of the problems you were discussing before are being solved, it's like it's at least a space where like the company's coming together to maybe like build bridges on those problems.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing the story. It was really exciting to share the news, and it's been great to see the support from especially the Canadian tech ecosystem. We've got lots of people taking part in Wavy's journey and cheering us on, which feels nice. And yeah, I mean, I think we founded Wavy because of the power of shared experiences. That's always been the focal point and the obsession. I just think it's a beautiful way to build a relationship, to have a shared experience with someone. Stories come out of it, memories come out of it. It's something that usually isn't just a transactional or one-off event. It's something that can build similar interests over time, build conversation over time, and really help bring people together. And I think that's what companies have struggled with most. If you're not working together all within four walls, how do you create that shared connection? You have to be so much more intentional about it. So we thought, what a better place to start than helping have really great shared experiences no matter where employees are located. We started with online experiences. I don't know about you, but I had a bit of an allergic reaction to the idea of virtual events being fun. Mm-hmm. And maybe part of the problem is calling them virtual events. The word virtual just doesn't sound real to me. So we started with saying, if we're going to get into this space, we have to work with partners to create online experiences that are friggin' magic, that the three of us and whoever else is joining would walk away saying, that was genuinely fun. And I got to know Douglas and Rob better. And, I'm going to tell people about this, and I'm leaving feeling more energized. So that's what we started with. But it's just ballooned and grown so much since then. and that companies were lacking that like central space to plan, manage, and measure the impact of culture initiatives. They're lacking the resources to keep it fresh and engaging with shared experiences and to keep it like inclusive and accessible. So we don't just offer online experiences. We offer asynchronous options as well, DIY options that you can host wherever you'd like, whether that's in person with your team or online. And then we're just getting into the in-person space. So Toronto is launching and is something we actually tested with a whole bunch of shop of folk last fall, and it was very successful. So excited to be launching that too.
Hey, the BetaKit podcast is brought to you this week by Osler, the leading business law firm for startups, high-growth companies, and investors in Canada. Hey, including even BetaKit. The firm has just released its Deal Points report on venture capital financings, an inaugural study of 332 anonymized Canadian venture capital and growth equity financings. Now, the report looks at deals from 2019 to 2021 and provides data and insights for founders, entrepreneurs, investors, and advisors contemplating transactions. So if you want to read the new report, you can check out the Deal Points report on venture capital financings at osler.com. That's OSLER.com. Hey, the BetaKit podcast is also brought to you by Cisco, and Cisco wants you to join them at the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto on May 5th from 2:30 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time to learn all about how migrating from an on-premise phone system to the cloud is the perfect solution for your business. From easier collaboration to simpler remote work, cloud calling has you covered. At the event, you'll hear from industry experts, and attendees will get a chance to win exciting prizes. So to learn more or to register for the event, go to www.business.bullfrog.net/hockey, and we will see you at the Hockey Hall of Fame in May.
One thing you brought up that's fascinating to me is the idea of measuring culture. How do you measure it?
Well, that's a great question. And it's funny because the first step is to just like actually start measuring it. When we started working with teams more and more, we just began unpacking this, saying budget is increasing across the board for culture initiatives, whether it's fun and games like team building or celebrations, learning and development, DE&I focus, wellness focus. There is more and more budget being spent in these areas as the importance of employee experience continues to grow. And we dug into it saying, how do you measure the effectiveness of this? And notice that most organizations, whether you've got 50 or 5,000 employees, there's a general lack of data and visibility in this space. A lot of companies don't even know how many initiatives they've done in a given year, whether the budget's been spent, and do people take part in it. So we're starting with very basic data and insights here, just giving visibility.
The cultural operations or the operationalizing of the culture. You're not measuring like, okay, Podcast Corp has a good 4 cultures. You're just measuring the culturally focused activities.
Yeah, first things first, giving visibility into like what's happening across the organization. And then we focus on 2 different areas. One is event or experience metrics. So how much budget was spent? Did people take part? And for those who did they enjoy it? Did they feel satisfied? Did they like the host? Do they have requests for next time? These are some of the things we surface for, initiative specific measurement. And then we're really excited and really starting to dig into the culture health or culture impact side in a bigger way. So do people feel more connected after taking part in shared experiences? Do they feel these experiences are positively impacting culture at their company? How is their happiness feeling at work? And we may be cooking up some new forms of measurement to indicate employee happiness and employee satisfaction, because a big finding we've had is that this is pretty broken. Most companies rely on a biannual or annual survey that feels kind of like surveillance, kind of top-down survey style, where we have the opportunity to provide data and insights from actual connections, networks within the company, activities, shared experiences. So really taking a bottom-up approach to how companies can reliably measure these sorts of things.
Isn't it just easier to record your employees at all times to just see how they feel?
But that's not what the people want.
Really? Okay. Well, surprise. No, okay. So I can't believe I'm going to say that and then transition into this next question. So I read a lot of the writings of Ross Signal Group, one Melissa and Jonathan Nightingale, because they are kind of a guiding star on this stuff for me, and they know where I live, so it's very easy for them to hold me accountable in my own operations. And they've been, unsurprisingly, because we've had them on the podcast a bunch of times to talk about this stuff, particularly during the start, middle, and continuation of COVID. They've been writing about this recently from the perspective of the idea. I think they're one of their most recent newsletters came out talking about the donuts aren't working, which was in reference to a recent kind of Slack extension that's allowing people to kind of schedule random meetings with each other. And I think the two major problems that they talk about off the top, just in general with work, are connection and alignment. And I think we've talked a lot about the connection need and how these experiences are coming into play, or even how companies are looking to just do different stuff to enable connection, which used to be automatic and now has to be planned for, if not programatized. What about the alignment component that's a little bit more strategic, a little bit more goal-oriented in terms of the company's operations, but even stuff in terms of not just like knowing your team, but ensuring that all the individuals of the team are being treated the way that they should? Because you had mentioned at one point like DEI initiatives related to this, and I'm wondering if there's another set of experiences that you're working on that we haven't talked about that are more core to the business operations than the human operations, or if the space that Wavy sits in sits beside those other conversations around those things as well. I'm just very interested to see the intersections right now.
Those are some great questions, and I'm a big fan of Raw Signal Group. So I also read that newsletter. And it's funny, I had the same thoughts as that newsletter. And I think it's whenever anything is forced or feels like it's not organic, it's not something that people genuinely enjoy taking part in. If I genuinely reached out to you saying, hey, Douglas, it's been a while. We haven't talked in a while. Do you want to grab a coffee chat? Or, maybe we're in the same area, go on a walk. You'd probably be like, yeah, that's great. We actually haven't talked in a while. So if there was a bot that reminded me to reach out to you because we haven't talked in a while and it was actually coming from a human, there might be a much better success rate there because people want to do things that feel more organic rather than more forced or controlled by something like a bot. So my team has actually unpacked that specific problem quite a bit, and we are playing around with it. Like, how do you connect people and help with 1-to-1 or 1-to-4 or more intimate groups in between larger company experiences? So it's something that I'm actually quite interested in.
Do you see that as part of Wavy's mandate, or a product that a product space you have to play in, or just maybe an opportunity or something interesting because of how you are focused on company cultural stuff?
I mean, we use lots of water-related puns and jokes at Wavy, and one of our product values is explore the ocean. So we do spend about 20% of our product time exploring fun things that are complementary or related to our space. But I wouldn't say we're in the people ops and learning and development space right now. However, when it comes to different types of culture initiatives, I would tag one of them as team building, the fun and games and celebratory experiences. And we've got some news coming in the wellness and DE&I space and some fantastic partnerships there. And it's something that is definitely complementary. And also, we released a feature for companies to add in their own initiatives. Some of the most special experiences are ones that you create yourself and that you host yourself. Maybe you're an expert at pasta making and want to teach your team how to do that. Or you're a designer and want to do a lesson in using Figma and creating your own design. Those are really valuable shared experiences. So teams can add custom content to their Wavy dashboard and create a really great experiences on their own. Our marketplace is really there as a value add. It's continually kind of evolving to be that culture hub or where culture happens. I think tying back to the pain point with the donuts of the world that Melissa wrote about, our whole mission is to help teams build culture with their people, not for them. So whatever products can do in our space to spark or empower people to lead these initiatives themselves, I think that'll be more powerful because we're humans, we're very social creatures. So human to human connection is ultimately what we're craving, even if we are working in a digital by design or remote first environment.
That resonates. We do something at BetaKit where we try our best. We call them BetaKit masterclasses, where we just have various team members kind of at a weekly-ish cadence teach or lecture on something that they're experts on. And it usually is reduced to, here's how to make this thing. Top 5 Raptors of all time. Is this or is this not a sandwich? best potato chips rankings, like things like that I could see a lot of like kind of a DIY or organic generated stuff going on here. That really resonates. But I'm also just thinking, like, wouldn't the one podcast dedicated to speaking to issues of Canadian tech and tech from a Canadian perspective be like the perfect place for a company to announce upcoming initiatives to a captive audience that is probably like dealing with this right now and could be an interesting kind of like pre-sale or warm lead scenario? Wouldn't such a podcast really tee up success?
I mean, it's going to be coming out shortly, but team building and the fun and games has been our bread and butter for the past couple of years. Maybe I'll share that June 1st, we're going to have a new format of experiences available to book directly in Wavy and host directly through your Wavy dashboard. It's going to be DE&I learning experiences with Avery Francis and the Bloom team. They typically offer multi-week or annual programs, but now companies will be able to book bite-sized DE&I learning focused experiences directly through Wavy. And we're going to be hosting a couple events, one in Toronto and one online, to celebrate and to really bring people and culture leaders together. Continue conversations just like this, like how to build a culture that's worth taking part in, how to create spaces that are inclusive and accessible.
How to pressure podcast guests to reveal important company operations before they're ready in service
It's
of
all
your
good.
listenership.
Avery and I have been talking about it on Twitter already, so it's okay. We'll be sharing a little bit, but we'll be officially sharing it soon. So stay tuned. But that's been a really great partnership, and working with their team has been fantastic, and we've got a few more exciting partnerships in store. So, the marketplace is really great, and also like empowering any Wavy user to be an experience creator so that you can host your masterclass or your TED Talks or lectures. And speaking of, someone on our team did a tiny TED Talk called Anything is a Soup, Salad, or Sandwich, and we are still debating it months later. So
person should be fired.
She should go on a global stage to talk about this because my mind is still blown.
Heart of darkness right there. Okay, so does that lead you into more, like, I know this isn't quite there, but one of the things I wanted to ask was, like, if you become that one room in the cafeteria that the whole company goes to talk about things or have fun or do the all hands or whatever digitally, does activities slightly more adjacent there when it comes to change management or other conversations like that? Is that something that you want to play in, or do you again see yourself a little bit more agnostic and you're more servicing up, whether it's like experience partners or through the marketplace, things like Bloom and those educational components? Like, do you want to have a role in deciding what companies experience? Do you have an editorial lens to that, or do you just want to be the platform where they just do their thing?
We already have a role in influencing how companies can better plan, manage, measure, and improve their culture initiatives over time. We call ourselves your culture partner, and we're working with experts and people in culture space to really continue to build this. And a lot of people come to us like looking for benchmarks. What are other high growth tech companies doing? That's who we're typically working with. How much should I be spending in each area of the budget? What do you see as being most impactful? And we often say, well, what does your team think? And that's where we start. So we work pretty closely with our customers, and a lot of this is getting built into our product. So it's evolving to be more of that culture operating system for teams that aren't all working within four walls, which I say would be 90% of companies going forward. Whatever tools and features we can continue to build in to help companies do that better, to get more intentional and proactive with their culture initiatives, the better. So yeah, that's absolutely the direction we're heading in.
As somebody who was stranded in New York pre-pandemic as a remote employee, and 149 people were in Toronto, it's nice to see that this remote problem is being addressed as a first-class problem as opposed to nice to have, because of the ebb and flow of this whole pandemic thing. And it doesn't sound like it's gonna. Basically, it's just messy. What is there like a through line that you found through these ebbs and flows of it's going to be fine? Actually, it's not going to be fine. It's going to be something like fine. And I understand that you're a platform, but have you seen patterns of activities or things that do work, or anti-patterns of things that really people should not be doing to build culture in their company?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of companies that are leading the way in what this looks like going forward are kind of off that it's going to be fine, it's not going to be fine flow, and just saying we have to look at this from a flexible perspective, no matter what, going forward. Some of the teams we work with, like Lupio and Jobber, I would say those are some great examples of who have really just embraced this new world of work and are kind of culture obsessed and just charging forward anyways, whether the pandemic continues to spike or continues to go away. So that's one thing. Something we're encouraging teams to do, and we're seeing a lot, is if you're going to be hosting something, call it a offsite, a town hall, a birthday celebration, your company's turning 10 years old, a holiday party, you name it. You can't really be inclusive and accessible to everyone if you're only offering it in one format anymore. So an in-person holiday party, that's great. People love to get together in person, and that's going to continue to happen. But you should be offering, or you could be offering, something online that people can do together live. Maybe they're remote, maybe they're busy and have families at home or other responsibilities, and they can't go to that in-person party, but would still like to be recognized and appreciated and get together in a different way. And you could also offer something asynchronous, like a gift or a perk that sparks an experience, baking something with your family or your partner, or, maybe there's a tied theme between these initiatives. We're really encouraging teams to do this like omni-channel approach to their initiatives so that it can include everyone and people can opt in whichever way best suits their like engagement style. So yeah, that's something we're starting to see.
We did a pod a few months ago with Access Now and Fable and talked about what's cool about that approach is that it allows people with different accessibility options or needs the ability to participate where they couldn't necessarily participate. That's the good side of it. The thing that I always wonder is if there is some IRL hangouts, does it create almost like a multi-tiered, the people who hang out can do that, the like nonverbal communication and the social cohesiveness thing that you can do when you're in person. And you still, when you're not there, you become almost like a second tier citizen. I remember when Trello, in the mid-teens, late teens, put out they're like, we're a remote first company. And they would do things like, if there is one person who is remote on this call, everyone's remote, even if you're sitting next to each other. So there was no like hierarchy of the person on the screen is less important than the person who's not on the screen. Are you creating this weird tiering structure then if you offer those kinds of things where there's the haves and the have-nots?
It's a good question. I mean, I think the whole intention is to build out these programs with employees, not for them, so that people who are interested in different sorts of experiences are actually taking part in what should be happening and why, and what they'd like to do most. And as leaders in companies that have hybrid or remote first workplaces, you've got to engage in different formats. If you're someone who's extroverted and prefers in person, you should probably take part in a few different things throughout the year so that you are mixing and mingling with different folks in your company. And I've seen some leadership teams and people and culture leaders do this really well over the past couple of years.
So as not to just defer to the thing you're most comfortable with, which would be never showing up in person, continuing to wear this hoodie, and never seeing Rob. Not that I'm projecting or anything. I'm just saying that there's if you offer everyone the option that they're most comfortable with in the moment and they choose that, then there's none of that cross mingling. Or again, I'll never wear pants to another meeting in my life.
I love that, first of all. But on this topic specifically for people leaders, it is important to engage in different formats so that you're not, pressuring folks to see, oh, well, management's only going to the in-person party. So if I better show face there and maybe do things they're not comfortable with or would prefer not to do if there wasn't that kind of pressure within the organization. But, in general, with these programs, we're recommending a variety of experiences throughout a given month and given quarter or year anyways. So that socials or community get-togethers aren't just done in one way. Like it's not just Friday happy hours and that's kind of what you do, but there's a variety in format, online, in-person, asynchronous, and a variety in category. Like, is this team building? Is it actually learning? Is it DE&I? Is it wellness? So providing a variety in that. And then I think the other interesting thing here is historically, companies have measured success of these initiatives saying, well, how many people showed up? But is it successful if someone shows up who actually doesn't want to be there at all? Like I had an investor say to me early on, if I don't want to do effing live yoga with my team, does that make me a bad employee? And I love that question because no, it shouldn't make you a bad employee. And that shouldn't be the way that companies measure the success of these programs. Like what matters at the end of the day is the impact it's having on connection, happiness, morale in your organization. Is it positively impacting retention over time? Looking at participation as the main success rate, I think needs to be changed as well.
Again, I don't want to do yoga if I have to wear pants. So people can make
camera
those
off then, Douglas.
Totally. I guess maybe we'll close this off on because, and I feel comfortable asking this question because you've mentioned some of the people or some of the companies that you work with. Are you seeing, particularly because you're trying to get really smart about measuring the impact of this stuff, difference in demands or requirements or how this is playing out based upon size of company? Because, let's take the cliche of like 2015 Canadian tech where it's like we've got the beer and the ping pong tables or the podcast room. And then there's the higher tier inspired from Google in the early 2000s of like, we've got the catered lunches and we spend a lot of money on this stuff because we print a lot of money. Do the expectations change from the team of 15 or the pre-seed or let's say pre-series A company versus, I don't know, Shopify when it comes to how this is being implemented or what's resonating or things like that? Is there anything you're seeing there by organization size and stage?
Mm-hmm. So we do work with organizations of all different sizes. I would say our most engaged customers or some that we work with most actively would be in the kind of 100 to 1,000 employee headcount range. And I think something interesting there is I'm not sure if you've heard of Dunbar's number, 150 people. Once you get past 150 people, you can't personally know everyone. So that's when companies really feel this pain point the most. But on the flip side, we are seeing earlier stage companies, Wavy being one of them. We're about 15 full-time. We're going to be between 20 to 30 full-time by the end of the year. Have to get a lot more intentional about doing things like this from the get-go because it is so competitive in finding talent, and you do have to be intentional about building that sense of community and belonging. And working hybrid, flexible, remote, it can be isolating. So there's this renewed focus on ways to create strong community, even at the early stages. I just think the difference that we see across our customers is frequency and budget for these things. Obviously, you've got a smaller budget at an earlier stage. We would probably recommend you do more DIY type experiences, host your own, use our DIY or asynchronous experiences, and maybe do something that's professionally hosted or something with kits every once in a while, once a quarter. Where with larger companies, you're seeing, all right, well, what's the plan for company-wide initiatives that are happening monthly, function-based initiatives that are happening every month or every 2 months, and then we've got a DE&I focus track and a wellness focus track, and there's a lot more for employees to take part in. So obviously the experience spend can be higher there.
Gotcha.
But
so not necessarily bigger and badder, but just more consistent across the tiers. Okay.
Yeah. But what's interesting in the common thread, especially within tech, we work with a lot of people leaders in tech. is how important it is to focus on the employee experience and to get creative with how you can foster kind of connection and belonging, even from an early stage. So that's been interesting to see.
Okay. Well, I mean, that might be an interesting place to close this off, because I think you've kind of got an opportunity here now where this is an audience where they're either as employees or as operators and owners thinking about this stuff daily, if not living it. And as part of what your company does and in your role, you're talking to a lot of other companies and hearing what they're thinking about, seeing what they're implementing, starting to try and measure this stuff. If there was a takeaway that you would want the listeners of this podcast to go away with when thinking about this stuff, what would you want them to really know? And I push you to be as directly honest as possible, because there's the high level framing of this stuff, which we're all familiar with, and then there's the Whisper Network real tea, and I think we have a real tea audience.
Okay. People are looking for flexibility above all else, and it's not groundbreaking advice, but it is an important one to continue sharing. Is like, talk to your team, talk to your people, figure out what they're looking for. In most cases, there's a gap between leadership and employees, where leadership says, we maybe have done too many socials or offered too many experiences for people to get together.
Having too much fun, kids.
Yeah, and team members are like, I don't know my colleagues other than a face and a name on Slack, and I want to know them. And I wish we had more opportunities to do that, and do that within work hours, and have ways to have shared experiences and connections. When people have friendships and can build trusted relationships at work, they're going to be happier. They're going to feel that sense of community and belonging. They're going to stay longer and be more productive with the work hours they have. It truly does lead to magical things. So start with talking to your people and finding out what they'd like to do. And you'd be surprised how often that step gets missed. A lot of leadership talking to each other, talking to other folks from other companies. And we start with the simple question of, what does your team want to do? 99% of the time, they don't know. So start there. Build culture with your employees, not for them.
More listening, less donuts.
Exactly.
The BetaKit podcast is produced by BetaKit Incorporated. It's edited by Katie Lohr, and its hosts are Rob Kennedy and me, Douglas Saltis. To learn more about how you can support this podcast, head to patreon.com/BetaKit.